the humble potato that changed the world. Tonight we're going to tell the story of something so ordinary that you probably walked past it without a second thought. It might be sitting in your kitchen right now. It doesn't sparkle like gold. It isn't as rare as diamonds. And yet this simple vegetable helped shape the course of human civilization. So get comfortable, dim the lights, take a slow, deep breath, and let your mind drift back through thousands of years of history. Our story begins high in the Andes Mountains of South America, more than 8,000 years ago. The air here was thin. The nights were bitterly cold. The mountains stretched endlessly toward the sky, their snowy peaks glowing beneath the morning sun. Most crops struggled to survive in such harsh conditions, but hidden beneath the rocky soil was a remarkable plant, the wild potato. These early potatoes looked very different from the ones we know today. Many were tiny, some were bitter. Others contained natural toxins that made them unsafe to eat. To most people, they would have seemed completely useless. But the people who lived in these mountains saw something different. Generation after generation, they carefully observed which potatoes tasted better, which ones survived the freezing winters, which ones produced the largest harvest. Year after year, century after century, they selected the best plants and grew them again. Without realizing it, they were becoming some of the world's very first plant breeders. The potato slowly changed. It became larger, safer to eat, more reliable, and before long, it became the foundation of life in the Andes. For these ancient people, the potato wasn't simply food. It was survival itself. A failed harvest could mean hunger. A successful harvest could mean another year of life. Naturally, potatoes became deeply connected to their beliefs. Many communities thanked the mountain spirits before planting. They celebrated after each successful harvest. The potato wasn't just growing beneath the soil. It was growing into the heart of their culture. Then they made another remarkable discovery. The freezing mountain nights could actually preserve food. Families left freshly harvested potatoes outside overnight, where the icy temperatures froze them solid. During the daytime, the strong mountain sun slowly dried them. Night after night, day after day, the potatoes lost nearly all their moisture. The result was a lightweight food that could last for years without spoiling. Today, historians know this preserved potato as chuño. It may not have looked very appetizing, but it allowed entire communities to survive long winters, droughts, and difficult years. Long before refrigerators, long before canned food, people living high in the Andes had already mastered one of history's most effective food preservation techniques. Because of the potato, villages expanded, populations grew, families settled in places where few other crops could survive. Little by little, a humble plant quietly supported the rise of one of South America's greatest civilizations. Yet beyond these mountains, nobody had ever heard of the potato. Europe knew nothing about it. Asia had never seen it. Africa had no idea it existed. For thousands of years, this extraordinary crop remained one of history's best-kept secrets. But that secret would not last forever. One day, strangers would arrive from across the ocean. They would carry steel weapons, unfamiliar languages, and dreams of unimaginable wealth. And among the treasures they discovered, hidden beneath the soil, was a simple potato, a discovery that would eventually feed millions of people and forever change the history of the world. But that is a story for the next chapter. For now, imagine the quiet mountains, the cold evening breeze, the peaceful silence, and beneath the earth, a small potato, patiently waiting to transform the future of humanity. The empire built on potatoes. Welcome back. Take another slow, deep breath. Allow your body to sink a little deeper into comfort. Tonight, our journey continues high above the clouds, in the towering Andes Mountains, where an extraordinary civilization was quietly changing history. Long before European kingdoms crossed the Atlantic Ocean, long before potatoes appeared on dinner tables around the world, the people of the Andes had already mastered the art of growing them. By the 15th century, one of the greatest civilizations in the Americas had risen, the Inca Empire. Stretching nearly 2,500 miles along the western edge of South America, the empire covered towering mountains, deep valleys, frozen peaks, and dry deserts. Traveling across such a vast land was difficult. Yet the Incas built thousands of miles of roads that connected distant villages, farms, and cities. Messengers could run these mountain paths day and night, carrying important news across the empire. But roads alone could not feed millions of people. Food was the true foundation of the empire, and no food was more valuable than the potato. Unlike corn, which struggled in freezing temperatures, potatoes thrived in the cold mountain soil. While other crops failed during harsh weather, potatoes often survived. For the Incas, this made them priceless. Farmers carved giant terraces into the steep mountainsides. From a distance, the mountains looked like enormous staircases stretching toward the sky. These terraces helped protect crops from erosion and made farming possible on otherwise impossible land. Each season required patience. Families planted potatoes by hand using simple wooden tools. There were no tractors, no engines. Only human strength and generations of knowledge passed from parents to children. Children learned how to recognize healthy plants. Grandparents taught which varieties grew best at different elevations. Every family carried centuries of farming wisdom. Over time, the Incas developed hundreds of different potato varieties. Some were perfect for soups. Some grew well in wet soil. Others survived freezing temperatures better than any other crop. Even today, Peru is home to thousands of unique potato varieties. Many descended from these ancient plants. But growing food was only half the challenge. Keeping it safe was just as important. The Incas built enormous storehouses across the empire. These stone buildings stood beside roads and mountain passes. Inside, workers carefully stored dried potatoes, corn, grains, and other supplies. The preserved potatoes, known as chuño, could last for years. If drought struck, if war interrupted harvests, or if disaster reached a village, the empire could open these storehouses and feed its people. It was an ancient emergency food system. Simple, practical, remarkably effective. The potato also fed the empire's workers. When thousands of laborers built roads, temples, bridges, and cities, food had to travel with them. Dried potatoes were light to carry, easy to prepare, and packed with energy. Without them, many of the empire's greatest construction projects might never have been completed. In many ways, the potato quietly powered one of history's greatest civilizations. Yet the Incas had no idea that their peaceful mountain world was about to change forever. Far across the Atlantic Ocean, European explorers searched for gold, for silver, for new lands. They dreamed of unimaginable riches. They were not searching for vegetables, certainly not potatoes. But history often changes because of the smallest discoveries. In the early 1500s, Spanish explorers finally reached the Andes. They were amazed by the magnificent cities, carefully built roads, and impressive stone architecture. But they also noticed something unusual. The local people depended heavily on an unfamiliar crop growing beneath the ground. It wasn't wheat. It wasn't rice. It wasn't anything Europe had ever seen. At first, many Spaniards paid little attention to it. Compared to glittering gold and precious silver, a dirty brown potato seemed worthless. How could such an ordinary plant matter? But over time, they realized something important. This humble crop kept entire populations alive in places where almost nothing else could grow. Without knowing it, they were looking at one of the most valuable plants in human history. Soon, ships leaving South America would carry more than gold and silver. Hidden among their cargo would be a strange little vegetable, a vegetable that would slowly cross oceans, transform European farming, feed millions, and eventually become one of the world's most important foods. But that remarkable journey begins in the next chapter. So tonight, picture the quiet mountain terraces, the cool evening air, the stars shining above the Andes, and farmers carefully placing tiny potatoes into the earth, never imagining that their simple harvest would one day change the world. The potato crosses the ocean. Welcome back Take a slow, comfortable breath. Let your thoughts drift gently away as we continue our quiet journey through history. Tonight, we leave the towering Andes Mountains behind and follow a small, dusty cargo onto wooden ships sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. It is the middle of the 16th century. Spanish ships are returning home from South America. Their holds are filled with treasures, gold coins, silver bars, precious jewels, exotic plants. Among all these valuable discoveries lies something that hardly anyone notices: a few rough brown potatoes. No one on board believes they are carrying a crop that will someday feed hundreds of millions of people. To most sailors, potatoes are simply another strange plant from a distant land. When the ships finally arrive in Spain, the potato receives little attention. Europe already has bread made from wheat. People eat barley, rye, oats, and many other familiar foods. Why would anyone want to eat a vegetable that grows hidden beneath the ground? Some people even find it suspicious. After all, it doesn't grow on a tree. It doesn't hang from a vine. It stays buried in the soil out of sight. To many Europeans, anything that grew underground seemed mysterious and untrustworthy. The potato belonged to the same plant family as deadly nightshade and poisonous plants. This only increased people's fears. Rumors quickly spread. Some claimed potatoes caused disease. Others believed they were unhealthy. A few even thought they were cursed. Of course, none of these stories were true. But fear often travels faster than facts. For many years, potatoes were not grown as food at all. Instead, some wealthy families planted them simply because the flowers looked beautiful. The soft white and purple blossoms decorated royal gardens. People admired the flowers, but ignored the potatoes growing beneath them. In some places, farmers fed potatoes to pigs instead of people. Others refused to grow them entirely. It seemed impossible that this strange vegetable would ever become popular. Yet the potato had one remarkable advantage. It asked for very little. It could grow in poor soil. It survived cold weather. It produced far more food than many traditional crops. Slowly, a few curious farmers began experimenting. They planted small fields. The harvest surprised them. One tiny potato planted in spring could produce several more by autumn. Year after year, families noticed something important. Even when wheat harvests were disappointing, the potatoes often survived. During difficult seasons, they quietly became a reliable backup food. Not everyone welcomed this newcomer. Some religious leaders questioned whether it should be eaten because it was never mentioned in the Bible. Others simply refused to trust anything unfamiliar. But hunger has a way of changing opinions. When food became scarce, people became more willing to try something new. One meal became another, then another. Before long, potatoes slowly found their place on European tables. Not because they were fashionable, not because they were expensive, but because they worked. They filled empty stomachs. They grew almost anywhere, and they helped families survive difficult years. No one celebrated this quiet revolution. There were no grand ceremonies. No kings declared the potato a national treasure. Instead, history changed almost silently. One small farm at a time, one village at a time, one family at a time. The humble potato continued its journey across Europe, unnoticed by most of the world. Yet within the next century, it would spread farther than anyone could imagine. Entire nations would depend on it. Powerful kingdoms would encourage its cultivation, and millions of lives would soon rely on this simple crop hidden beneath the earth. But that story belongs to our next chapter. For now, imagine an old wooden sailing ship drifting across a calm Atlantic Ocean. Below the deck, hidden among barrels and crates, a handful of forgotten potatoes quietly waits, unnoticed, uncelebrated, completely unaware that they are about to change the future of humanity forever. The crop that saved Europe. Settle into your favorite position. Take one slow, peaceful breath, and let the gentle rhythm of history carry you a little farther into the past. By the early 1600s, the potato had quietly settled into parts of Europe. It was no longer a complete stranger, but it was still far from being loved. Many farmers remained loyal to wheat and rye. Generations had grown these grains, baked bread from them, and trusted them through good years and bad. The potato was still considered unusual, perhaps even a little suspicious, yet nature had its own plans. Europe's population was growing. Every year, more mouths needed to be fed. Fields became crowded. Good farmland became harder to find. Poor families often struggled to harvest enough grain before winter arrived. Then something remarkable became impossible to ignore. A small piece of land planted with potatoes could produce far more food than the same amount of wheat. The crop also required less care. Even in rocky soil, even during cold seasons, the potato continued to grow. For struggling farmers, this was nothing short of extraordinary. Slowly, village after village began planting larger potato fields, not because they wanted to follow a trend, but because hungry families needed dependable food. Children who once went to bed hungry now had fuller meals. Parents worried a little less about harsh winters. For many ordinary people, life became slightly more secure. Governments soon noticed the change. Kings and local rulers realized that well-fed people were healthier. Healthy people worked harder. Healthy workers paid taxes. Healthy soldiers fought stronger battles. Suddenly, the potato was becoming more than food. It was becoming a tool of national strength. Some rulers actively encouraged farmers to grow potatoes. Others offered free seed potatoes. A few even organized public demonstrations, teaching people how to cook this unfamiliar crop. At first, many villagers remained skeptical. Some laughed. Others refused. Old habits are difficult to change, but year after year, the evidence became impossible to ignore. Whenever grain harvests failed, the potatoes often survived. Whenever harsh weather damaged wheat, potatoes remained safely hidden beneath the soil. Storms could flatten fields of grain, but underground, the potato waited patiently. Protected, quiet, reliable. By the early 1700s, potatoes had spread across much of Europe. What had once been viewed as an odd curiosity was becoming an everyday meal. Boiled potatoes, mashed potatoes, roasted potatoes, simple dishes that required little more than fire and water. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just enough to satisfy an empty stomach. As more families relied on potatoes, Europe's population began to grow faster than ever before. Historians still debate exactly how much credit belongs to the potato, but many agree on one important point. Without this humble crop, Europe could not have supported so many people. Entire communities survived because of it. Cities expanded. New farms appeared. Children who might once have faced starvation now reached adulthood. The potato quietly helped reshape an entire continent. And yet, its greatest challenge was still waiting, because relying too heavily on a single crop can be dangerous. Very dangerous. Far to the west, on a green island called Ireland, potatoes would soon become almost everyone's daily meal. For many families, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It seemed like the perfect food, cheap, nutritious, easy to grow. But history often reminds us that even the greatest success can carry hidden risks. A disaster unlike anything Europe had seen was slowly approaching. One tiny disease, almost invisible to the human eye, would soon destroy potato fields across an entire nation, and the consequences would change millions of lives forever. But that is a story for another quiet evening. For now, picture a peaceful European countryside. The sun is setting behind gentle hills. A farmer walks slowly through neat rows of potato plants. The evening air is cool. Birds sing softly in the distance. Everything feels calm. Everything feels safe. But beneath those peaceful fields, history is quietly preparing its next great surprise. The Great Potato Famine. Welcome back. Find a comfortable position. Let your breathing become slow and steady. As the world around you grows quieter, we'll continue our gentle journey through history. Tonight, our story takes us to the green island of Ireland. Rolling hills stretched across the countryside. Stone cottages dotted the landscape. Morning mist drifted gently over fields. For generations, farming had been the heart of Irish life. And among all the crops growing in those fields, one stood above the rest. The potato, By the early 1800s, millions of Irish people depended on it every single day. For many families, potatoes were breakfast, potatoes were lunch, and potatoes were dinner. A small plot of land could produce enough potatoes to feed an entire family for months. They were nutritious, filling, and surprisingly reliable. For poor farmers, there was simply nothing better. Life was still difficult. Most families worked from sunrise until sunset. Their homes were simple. Money was scarce. But as long as the potato harvest was good, they could survive. Year after year, the fields produced healthy crops. Children helped gather potatoes from the soil. Parents stored them carefully for the coming winter. Everything seemed secure. Everything seemed predictable. Then, in the autumn of 1845, something changed. Farmers began noticing strange dark spots on the potato leaves. At first, it didn't seem serious. Perhaps the weather had been unusual. Perhaps the plants would recover. But within days, the healthy green fields began turning black. The leaves withered. The stems collapsed. When farmers dug into the soil, hoping to save their harvest, they found potatoes that were soft, black, and rotting. A tiny organism, now known as Phytophthora infestans, had spread rapidly across the country. The disease became known as potato blight. The speed was astonishing. Healthy fields seemed to disappear almost overnight. The smell of decay filled the air. Families watched months of hard work vanish before their eyes. The following year, many hoped for better luck. They planted again. They waited. They prayed. But the blight returned. Once again, the harvest failed. Then it happened again and again. For several heartbreaking years, Ireland's potato crops continued to collapse. The consequences were devastating. Millions of people had depended on a single crop. When that crop disappeared, there was very little left to eat. Food became scarce. Prices rose beyond what poor families could afford. Many people searched forests for edible plants. Some gathered seaweed along the coast. Others survived on thin soup made from whatever they could find. Hunger spread from village to village. Entire communities grew silent. Families weakened. Children became dangerously thin. Many left their homes hoping to find food elsewhere. Some walked for days. Others crowded into workhouses where conditions were harsh and overcrowded. Many made an even more difficult decision. They left Ireland forever. Thousands boarded crowded ships bound for North America. The journey was long. The conditions were difficult. Some ships became known as coffin ships because so many passengers became sick during the voyage. Yet people continued to leave, hoping for a better future. By the time the famine finally began to ease, more than 1 million people had died. Another 1 million had emigrated. Ireland would never be the same again. Villages disappeared. Families were separated across oceans. The population of the island fell dramatically. Even today, the memory of the Great Potato Famine remains deeply woven into Irish history. It is remembered not only as a natural disaster, but as a human tragedy that changed the course of an entire nation. Historians continue to study the famine, asking difficult questions about politics, food distribution, and responsibility. But one lesson stands above all others. Depending too heavily on a single crop can leave millions vulnerable. Nature often reminds us that diversity brings resilience. The humble potato had once saved countless lives. Yet under different circumstances, the failure of that same crop brought unimaginable hardship. History is rarely simple. It is filled with moments of hope and moments of sorrow. As we end tonight's chapter, picture the quiet Irish countryside once more. The evening breeze moves gently across empty fields. The stone cottages remain. The hills are peaceful. The stars shine overhead. And somewhere beneath the dark soil, a story of resilience, loss, and hope continues to echo through history. In our next chapter, we'll discover how the potato recovered from this tragedy and eventually became one of the world's most important foods, spreading to nearly every corner of the globe. The potato conquers the world. Welcome back. Take a slow, gentle breath. Allow your body to become a little heavier. Let the worries of today slowly fade away as we continue our peaceful journey through history after the Great Potato Famine. Many believed the potato's story had reached its end. How could a crop that had brought so much suffering ever regain people's trust? But history often takes unexpected turns. The potato was not the enemy. The real danger had been relying on a single variety. Farmers and scientists slowly began to understand this important lesson. Different varieties of potatoes responded differently to disease. Some were stronger. Some survived harsh weather better than others. From that point forward, many countries began growing a wider range of potatoes, instead of depending on only one type. This simple change made future harvests much safer. As the 19th century continued, the world itself was changing. Steamships crossed the oceans faster than ever before. Railroads connected distant cities. Trade expanded across continents, along with people, ideas, and machines. The potato traveled too. It reached Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, North America, Asia, Africa, and eventually almost every place where the climate allowed it to grow. Farmers quickly discovered why the potato had become so valuable. It produced a large harvest from a relatively small piece of land. It could survive cool weather. It stored well through the winter, and it provided important nutrients that helped keep families healthy. For millions of people, it became one of the most dependable foods on Earth. In Russia, potatoes slowly became part of everyday life. At first, many people were suspicious. Some even called them the devil's apples. Rumors spread that eating potatoes was dangerous. But over time, hunger proved stronger than fear. Families learned how to boil them, roast them, mash them, and add them to hearty soups. Before long, potatoes became a familiar sight at nearly every table. Across Europe, cooks invented countless recipes. Simple baked potatoes, creamy mashed potatoes, golden fried potatoes, warm potato stews that filled homes with comforting aromas. Every country added its own traditions. The same humble vegetable became part of hundreds of different cultures. Across the Atlantic, potatoes also found a new home in North America. Farmers planted vast fields. Harvests grew larger every year. As cities expanded during the Industrial Revolution, workers needed affordable, filling food. Once again, the potato answered that need. Factories, railroads, and growing towns all depended on people who needed energy for long days of work. A simple potato could provide much of that energy. Scientists also became increasingly interested in the crop. They studied diseases, developed stronger varieties, improved farming methods. Year by year, potato harvests became larger and more reliable than ever before. By the 20th century, the potato had become one of the world's most important food crops. It quietly joined rice, wheat, and maize as one of humanity's greatest sources of nourishment. Today, billions of people eat potatoes in one form or another. Some enjoy crispy French fries. Others prefer baked potatoes with butter. Some cook spicy curries. Others prepare delicate dumplings. From small mountain villages to busy modern cities, the potato has become part of everyday life. It appears so ordinary that most people never stop to wonder where it came from. Few realize that every potato carries a history stretching back thousands of years to the high. And his mountains, a history of ancient farmers, powerful empires, ocean voyages, scientific discoveries, great triumphs, and heartbreaking tragedies, all hidden beneath its rough brown skin. As tonight's chapter comes to a close, picture a single potato resting quietly in your hand. It seems so simple, so ordinary, yet inside that humble vegetable lives one of the greatest stories in human history. A story of survival, adaptation, hope, and the quiet power of ordinary things. In our next chapter, we'll uncover some of the world's strangest potato traditions, surprising facts, and unusual moments in history that most people have never heard before. Until then, rest peacefully and let history gently carry you into sleep. The world's strangest potato stories. Welcome back. Make yourself comfortable once again. Take a slow, gentle breath and allow your mind to wander through another quiet chapter of history. Tonight, instead of following great empires or famous battles, we'll explore something a little different. The strange, the surprising, and sometimes even amusing stories that have followed the humble potato across the world. By now, the potato had traveled far beyond the Andes Mountains. It had crossed oceans, fed kingdoms, survived wars, and become one of the most common foods on Earth. Yet, despite its ordinary appearance, the potato has collected an extraordinary number of stories. Let's begin in Peru, the birthplace of the potato. Even today, farmers there grow thousands of different varieties. Some potatoes are bright purple, others are deep blue. Some are almost black. Others are golden yellow, red, or even pink. Many are shaped in unusual ways. Some are long and twisted. Others are perfectly round. Walking through a traditional potato market in Peru is almost like visiting an art gallery created by nature. Every basket tells the story of generations of careful farming. Every color reflects hundreds of years of selection and patience. Now let's travel to Europe. When potatoes first arrived, many wealthy people believed only the flowers were beautiful. They placed potato blossoms in elegant gardens. Ladies sometimes wore the flowers in their hair during celebrations. Meanwhile, the potatoes growing beneath the soil were ignored. Imagine planting a fruit tree only to admire its leaves while throwing away the fruit. History can be wonderfully strange. Across the ocean, another surprising tradition appeared. During long sea voyages, sailors often carried potatoes aboard their ships, not only because they lasted a long time, but because fresh potatoes contained vitamin C. Although sailors didn't yet understand vitamins, they slowly discovered that potatoes helped prevent scurvy, a dangerous disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. Without realizing the science behind it, they had found another reason to value this simple crop. As the years passed, potatoes became symbols of comfort. During difficult times, wars, economic hardship, or long winters, a warm potato meal often reminded people of home. Simple foods have a remarkable way of creating powerful memories. Many families pass down potato recipes from grandparents to grandchildren. A single dish could connect generations. In some countries, harvest festivals celebrated the arrival of the potato season. Neighbors gathered together. Children laughed in the fields. Families shared meals around long wooden tables. The potato had become much more than food. It had become part of culture itself. Scientists, meanwhile, continued making fascinating discoveries. Potatoes naturally grow underground because they store energy inside thick stems called tubers. Those tubers allow the plant to survive difficult conditions and grow again the following season. Nature had designed an incredibly efficient survival system. Even today, researchers continue studying potatoes to develop stronger varieties, capable of resisting disease and adapting to changing climates. The story of the potato is still being written. Perhaps one of the most surprising facts is how many languages have their own unique word for it. Across the world, different names, different recipes, different traditions. Yet they all refer to the same remarkable plant first cultivated thousands of years ago in the Andes. No matter where you travel, chances are you'll find potatoes served in some form. Boiled, baked, mashed, roasted, fried, steamed, or cooked into dishes that have been treasured for centuries. Very few foods have traveled so far, or touched so many lives, and perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. How something so small, so ordinary, so easily overlooked, could quietly become one of the foundations of human civilization. As tonight's journey comes to an end, picture a peaceful evening in a small mountain village. A cooking fire glows softly. The stars shine brightly overhead. A family gathers around a simple meal. There are no grand feasts, no priceless treasures, only warm food, quiet conversation, and gratitude for another peaceful day. Sometimes history reminds us that the greatest gifts are also the simplest, and few gifts have served humanity more faithfully than the humble potato. Rest now, sleep peacefully, and when you're ready, we'll continue with the final chapter of this remarkable journey through the history of one of the world's most extraordinary ordinary foods. A simple potato, an extraordinary legacy. Welcome back. Settle in one last time. Take a slow, peaceful breath in and gently breathe out. As the day fades away, let's finish our journey with the final chapter in the remarkable story of the potato. It is easy to overlook the ordinary things in life. A loaf of bread, a glass of water, a warm bowl of soup, or a single potato resting quietly on a kitchen table. We see these things so often that we rarely stop to ask how they became part of our everyday lives. Yet every ordinary object carries an extraordinary history. The potato is no exception. Its journey began more than 8,000 years ago in the cold mountains of South America. There, ancient farmers patiently transformed a wild and bitter plant into a dependable source of food. They had no modern tools, no laboratories, no machines. Only careful observation, patience, and generations of shared knowledge. Without realizing it, they created one of the world's most successful crops. Centuries later, the potato crossed the Atlantic Ocean aboard wooden sailing ships. At first it was ignored. Some people feared it, others laughed at it. Many believed it was unfit for human consumption. But slowly, quietly, the potato proved itself. It grew where other crops failed. It fed families through difficult winters. It helped cities expand. It supported growing populations. And it became one of history's greatest silent heroes. The potato witnessed the rise of empires. It survived revolutions. It traveled with explorers. It crossed deserts. It climbed mountains. It reached islands far from its birthplace. Generation after generation, it adapted to new climates, new cultures, and new kitchens. Then came moments of heartbreak. The Great Irish Potato Famine showed the world how fragile food systems could become when people depended on only one crop. It was a painful lesson, one that changed agriculture forever. From that tragedy came new ideas. Scientists searched for stronger varieties. Farmers planted greater diversity. Nations learned the importance of protecting their food supply. The potato continued evolving. Today it grows on nearly every continent, from the snowy valleys of the Andes to the farms of Europe, the plains of North America, the villages of Asia, and the fields of Africa. Billions of people eat potatoes every year. Some enjoy them baked beside a family dinner. Others eat them in soups on cold winter evenings. Some prepare delicate dumplings. Others share crispy fries with friends. Each meal carries a small piece of history. Most people never think about it. Yet behind every potato lies thousands of years of human ingenuity. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson this humble plant can teach us. History is not always shaped by kings, or great battles, or famous inventions. Sometimes, history changes because ordinary people quietly improve ordinary things. A farmer chooses the healthiest plant. A family shares knowledge with the next generation. A traveler carries an unfamiliar crop across an ocean. Small decisions, repeated over centuries, can transform the world. The potato reminds us that greatness does not always appear extraordinary. Sometimes it hides beneath the soil, patiently waiting, quietly serving humanity, never asking for recognition. As our story comes to a close, imagine the sun slowly setting behind the Andes Mountains where everything began. The sky glows with soft shades of orange and gold. A cool breeze drifts across the ancient terraces. The earth is calm. The mountains stand silent, just as they have for thousands of years. Somewhere beneath that peaceful soil, tiny potatoes continue to grow just as they did long before history books were written. Their story continues. And now, our journey gently comes to its end. Thank you for spending this quiet evening exploring one of history's most remarkable ordinary foods. May your thoughts become lighter. May your mind become peaceful. And may you drift into a deep, restful sleep. Good night. And until our next journey through history, sleep well. The secret history of bread. Welcome back. Take another slow, gentle breath. Allow your body to relax just a little more. Tonight, we leave the story of the humble potato behind and begin the history of another food that has quietly shaped human civilization for thousands of years. Bread. Today, bread is everywhere. on breakfast tables, in small village bakeries, in busy city cafes, and in kitchens across nearly every continent. It seems so ordinary that few people stop to wonder where it came from. But thousands of years ago, there was no bread, no bakeries, no warm loaves fresh from the oven, only wild grasses growing quietly across ancient fields. Long before cities existed, before kings ruled kingdoms, before written language, small groups of hunter-gatherers wandered across forests, rivers, and open plains searching for food. Life was unpredictable. Some days they found enough to eat. Other days they did not. Among the many plants they collected were tiny wild grains. At first, these grains were eaten raw. They were hard, dry, and difficult to chew, yet they provided valuable energy. Slowly, people began experimenting. They crushed the grains between flat stones, mixed them with water, and placed the soft mixture onto hot rocks beside a fire. The result was simple: flat, dense, and nothing like the bread we know today. Yet it was the beginning of one of humanity's oldest foods. Nobody knows exactly who baked the very first loaf. History has forgotten their name. But their simple discovery would eventually feed billions of people. As centuries passed, farming slowly replaced hunting in many parts of the world. Villages appeared. Fields of wheat stretched across the landscape. Harvests became larger. Communities became more permanent. With more grain came more bread. Every culture created its own version. Some baked thin flatbreads, others baked thick round loaves. Each recipe reflected the land, the climate, and the people who made it. And just like the potato, bread quietly became the foundation of civilization. Without bread, many ancient cities could never have grown. Without bread, great empires might never have fed their armies. Without bread, history itself may have taken a very different path. But that is a story for the next chapter. For now, picture an ancient village at sunset. A small fire crackles softly. Someone gently places a piece of dough onto a warm stone. The smell of fresh bread slowly fills the cool evening air. Simple, peaceful, timeless. And with that comforting thought, allow yourself to drift a little deeper into rest. The first baker in history. Welcome back. Take a slow, peaceful breath. Let your eyes grow a little heavier. Allow the sounds around you to fade into the distance as we continue our quiet journey through the history of bread. In the previous chapter, we discovered how ancient people first mixed crushed grain with water and cooked it on hot stones. It was simple. It was humble. But it changed everything. Now let us imagine an ordinary morning nearly 10,000 years ago. The sun slowly rises over a small farming village in the ancient Middle East. The air is cool. Birds sing softly in the distance. Smoke gently rises from cooking fires. The village is beginning another peaceful day. There are no clocks, no roads, no markets, only a handful of mud brick homes surrounded by fields of wheat and barley. In one of those homes, someone begins preparing breakfast. They pour a small pile of grain onto a flat stone. Another stone is placed on top. Slowly, patiently, they grind the grain into a fine powder. The work is repetitive, quiet, almost peaceful. It takes time, sometimes an hour, sometimes longer. There are no machines to help, only steady hands and endless patience. When enough flour has been made, it is mixed with water, nothing more. No sugar, no butter, no salt, just flour and water. The dough is shaped by hand, then carefully placed onto a warm stone beside the fire. As it cooks, a wonderful smell fills the little home. For the first time in history, something that resembles bread begins to appear. It is flat, dense, a little smoky, but warm and filling. The family gathers together. Each person tears off a small piece. No one knows they are taking part in a tradition that will continue for thousands of years. Outside the house, life moves slowly. Farmers walk into the fields. Children collect firewood. Others carry water from a nearby river. Every task requires effort. Nothing happens quickly. Yet this slow rhythm of life allows people to notice the seasons, the changing weather, the movement of birds, the growth of crops. Every loaf of bread depends on nature. A little too much rain, the harvest suffers. Too little rain, the fields become dry. Strong winds, hungry insects, or an early frost, any of these can destroy months of hard work. That is why ancient people respected bread so deeply. It was never taken for granted. Every loaf represented months of labor. Planting, waiting, harvesting, grinding, mixing, baking. Every meal was the reward for countless hours of work. As villages became towns, and towns became cities, bread became more than food. It became a symbol of community. Neighbors shared ovens, families baked together. Fresh bread greeted travelers. It welcomed guests. It marked celebrations. Even today, across much of the world, offering someone bread is still seen as a gesture of kindness and hospitality. The first bakers never imagined that their simple recipe would survive for thousands of years. Yet every loaf baked today carries a small piece of their legacy, a quiet reminder that history is often built by ordinary people doing ordinary work with extraordinary patience. And perhaps that is the most comforting thought of all. As the fire slowly burns lower, the last loaf finishes baking. The village grows quiet. The stars begin to appear overhead. A gentle breeze moves across the fields of wheat. Everything is calm. Everything is still. And somewhere, a warm loaf of bread cools quietly on a stone, waiting for another peaceful morning to begin. Good night, and let your thoughts drift gently into a deep and restful sleep.